Hi, and welcome to Engineering Essentials AutoCAD Instruction. In this episode, we will be talking about the difference between absolute and relative coordinates. Absolute coordinates are measured with respect to or relative to the current origin, whereas relative coordinates are measured relative to the last coordinate entered via the keyboard or mouse. Before we begin, let's check to see what type of drawing we are in by using the commands units and limits. So remember, units checks what type of units we are using and the precision. So here we can see that we're using inches and the precision is 2 decimal places. So that's okay, and we will check limits. This command checks the paper size. And the lower left corner, that's the origin, so that should be 0, 0. We'll leave that. And this is 11 by 8.5, which is the normal paper size, so we'll leave that. Alright, so everything's okay. Alright, so let's start by visualizing the coordinate plane. Now, AutoCAD gives us the option of showing a grid, which places lines or dots at selected coordinate points. So let's go ahead down here in the status bar, and you can see the grid is already activated. We can deactivate that by clicking on this icon here and activate it again. So you can see here's the grid, and we can change the size of the grid. So I'll just type in grid and just choose any size you like. Right now it's at 1/2 inch. So I'll put 1/4 inch, and you can see that it changes size. So the status bar gives us a quick way of turning that on and off. Alright, if you want to change any of the settings other than the size, an easy way to do that is to type D settings. This gets you into the drafting settings window, and in the snap and grid tab, you can see there are snap options and grid options. This allows you to go to the 2D model space grid, which changes the grid from lines to dots, and it also allows you to display the grid beyond the limits. Right now the grid only goes on the limits or your paper size, so you can see the grid does not go beyond that. But once we click this to be active, the grid will go on the entire space. So I'll go ahead and go OK, and you can see the grid just spreads out beyond our paper space. Alright, so let's move on and continue to talk about the difference between absolute and relative coordinates. So let's say that I want to draw a horizontal line that is 4 units long. Alright, so if I start the line at the coordinate position 3, 3, then it's easy to calculate what the endpoint would be. We just add 4 units to the x-coordinate, and the endpoint would be 7, 3. So let's go ahead and do that. So I will draw a line. My first point is going to be 3, 3. And the last point will be 7, 3, giving us a line that is 4 units long. Alright, but what happens if I don't know where my line starts? I just take my mouse and I click anywhere. Well, now I have no idea what the end point should be, but I still want the line to be 4 units long. This is where relative coordinates come in handy, because now I want to draw something relative to my last point entered. So if it's relative to the last point entered, then the end point would be 4, 0. 4 from the last point. But how do I let AutoCAD know that I want it to be relative to the last point entered and not to the coordinates? Well, we use this handy little symbol at, the one above your 2. That tells the program that it's going to be relative. So now I can just go 4, 0, and that gives me a relative coordinate. Alright, so that's relative to the last point. All right, now we've only been dealing so far with Cartesian coordinates, x and y. Can AutoCAD handle other coordinates? It can. It can also do polar coordinates or r theta coordinates. So let's say that if I want to draw a line that's 3 units long at an angle of 30 degrees, I can do that. So let's do a line. And again, I'll just choose any point because I'm going to be relative to my last point entered. And again, I'll give AutoCAD that little cue that it's going to be relative, so the at symbol. And I know I want it to be 3 units long, and I want it to be at an angle. And I'll tell AutoCAD I want it at an angle with this little less than sign and 30 degrees. So that's how you do polar coordinates. All right, so that's a little bit on relative and absolute coordinates. So I hope this is helpful, and I'll see you in the next episode.